Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be a recap of all of the books that I read in May 2023. If you're interested in seeing what I read last month, please stick around. As I said in my introduction, this video is going to be a look at all of the books that I read in May 2023. May was definitely a little bit of a slower reading month for me when compared to the last couple of months. I think that last year I kind of had the same thing happen. As the weather started getting warmer, I was just doing more out of the house and reading less, which I think is totally fine. I did read a couple of really amazing books this month, so I'm very excited to talk about them. As usual, I will be referencing my Archer and Olive Amy Tangerine collab reading journal. I am obsessed with my reading journal this year. It's actually super stuffed up, and I was planning on using this for the entire year, but because it's so stuffed, I actually think I'm going to move into a new one for the second half of 2023, which is not something I was anticipating. So the first book that we're going to talk about in May, I actually don't have the physical copy of right now because I lent it to one of my work colleagues, and that is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I have a goal of reading one mystery thriller style book every month of 2023, and I decided to pick Rock, Paper, Scissors for that. This is my second Alice Feeney book, and while I didn't dislike the first one I read by her, it also didn't blow me away. I've heard so many great things about Rock, Paper, Scissors, though. I've always heard that the twist is something you don't see coming, and I will say I did not see the twist coming. It definitely got me. I enjoyed the book. I didn't absolutely love the book. Like, it's not my favorite thriller I've ever read, but I did think it was really good, and I did really enjoy the twist. And so I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book we're going to talk about is one of my most anticipated releases for 2023. I fell in love with this author last year, and I have read every single book by her, and I've just been so looking forward to the release of this one, and that is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. So this is the second book in a series, the first of which came out last year. That was When in Rome. I loved When in Rome. I thought it was super cute. So I was very excited to pick this up. I feel like Sarah Adams writes the best light, fluffy, rom-com-y romances out there, and her books are always an instant purchase for me. I will read every single thing that she publishes, and this book was just such a lovely delight. I needed this when I read it. It made me so happy, and I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was one that I've been really looking forward to. I recently read the ACOTAR series, and I've been wanting to dive into more fantasy, and I've heard that this is a really great fantasy book to get into, and so I ended up picking up 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I will say this was a very slow start for me. I don't know why, but it just took me a while to really get into this story and to really kind of connect with the characters and that found family friend group kind of a thing. But once I did, I was completely invested, and I ended up really enjoying this. I did give it 3.5 out of 5 stars just because I had to kind of force myself to keep going for probably the first quarter of the book before it really caught me. So I did give it 3 out of 5 stars. At this point in the month, I was just so busy, and I wasn't able to read as much as I wanted to. And so I was worried that I wasn't going to hit some of the goals that I had for myself this month with regards to reading. And one of those goals was that I wanted to read a book of poetry. I want to read a book of poetry every month of the year, just like I want to read a mystery thriller. So I decided instead of just going straight into Crooked Kingdom, I would actually pick up the book of poetry just to kind of get that out of the way. And so I ended up reading All Along You Were Blooming by Morgan Harper Nichols. This was really, I liked this. It's really nice. The book itself is just all these pages are illustrated so beautifully. There's some like floral designs, there's some abstract designs. Like, I just love the way that this book was put together, but I do think it ended up becoming a little bit monotonous, a little bit of much of the same. So I think that if this had been edited down to be maybe a quarter shorter, it would have been more enjoyable. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then I immediately picked up the second book in the Six of Crows duology, which is A Crooked Kingdom. I wanted to devour this. I was incredibly frustrated because, again, I was so busy at this point in the month, kind of like the second week of May, that it actually took me like a full week to get through this. And all I wanted to do was read. Like, all I wanted to do was pick this up constantly and read it. Thankfully, I finally was able to like carve out some time, and I'm so glad I was able to get through it because I really, really enjoyed this. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. This book just, oh, it's so good. It's so good. And honestly, like, I wish there was more. Like, I wish there was more with these characters because I ended up loving them so, so much. The next book that I ended up reading was an ARC that I received from NetGalley, and that is Mismatched by Wendy Millian. I'm not gonna lie, this one just didn't hit for me. I'm not someone who necessarily hates the miscommunication trope because I think that a lot of times in real life we do miscommunicate with each other, and that's a very real thing. But the miscommunication in this book was just on another level, and it was so frustrating. It's also a second chance romance, and while I do think that there are certain ways that second chance romance can be done that I would like and enjoy, the way that it was done in this book was not something I liked or enjoyed. It was just frustrating and irritating, and I ended up giving this 2.5 out of 5 stars. It just was not for me. After reading Mismatched, I desperately wanted more fantasy and I didn't have any more fantasy on my TBR, so I decided to break from my TBR and pick up a book that I purchased not that long ago because I just kept seeing it everywhere, and that is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is another one that was a little bit of a slower start for me. Like, this, when I started reading it, I was immediately thinking, okay, this is YA. This is a little cheesy. It's a little corny, but I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna stick with it. It very quickly develops enough that it doesn't seem cheesy or corny anymore, and you just are desperate to know what's happening. I read this Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I ended up immediately going into The Ballad of Never After, which is the second book in this series. And so there's one like shocking thing that happens, and to be totally honest, I can't remember if it happens in Once Upon a Broken Heart or in The Ballad of Never After. I think it happens in Once Upon a Broken Heart, but it was so shocking that I literally like gasped out loud and was like, oh my gosh. And I never do stuff like that when I'm reading a book. So I ended up really, really enjoying this and giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And again, like I said, I ended up immediately going into The Ballad of Never After. This was just high stakes all the way through. Go, go, go. And I loved it so, so much. And I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And it ends on such a cliffhanger that, like, I am so frustrated that the third book in the series is not out yet. I don't want to wait until the fall to read it. I want it now. After reading The Ballad of Never After, I ended up getting into an audiobook that I received an ARC for via NetGalley, and that was Bad Summer People by Emma. I don't know if it's Emma Rosenblum or Emma Rosenblum, so I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that at all. This one was a mystery thriller, but I will be honest, it is like the juiciest of juicy summer reads to me, to the point where the juiciness of the dynamics between the characters was so captivating that I like forgot about the mystery element to the story, honestly. I love this. I thought this was so great. It just captured my attention right away. And it's about wealthy people and their summer houses and their relationships and like all of the drama going on. And it was just so enjoyable. I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really, really love the audiobook for this. Highly recommend the audiobook. The next book that I ended up reading was another arc that I got through NetGalley. I read this one on my Kindle, and that was A Love Catastrophe by Helena Hunting. I enjoyed this. It definitely was an ideal scenario, kind of a romance, like the perfectly sweet and adorable female character, the perfectly charming and like caring and attentive male character. But looking beyond that a little bit, I really enjoyed the story and the development of their relationship and the fact that they talked about meaningful and deep things, the way that their families really became an invested part of their relationship. The biggest thing that I liked about this story was that the third act conflict was not between the two main characters. It wasn't between the female and male leads. It wasn't miscommunication. It wasn't a relationship breakdown. It's something that happened with the female lead character's professional life that bled into her personal life. And the male character was just there to support her and help her in any way he could. And I loved that that was the third act conflict. So I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't think it was the best romance I've ever read, but I really did enjoy it and I would recommend it. Next, I ended up reading my Instagram challenge book for May 2023. I knew that this was a mystery thriller, and for some reason, after reading Rock, Paper, Scissors, I wasn't dying to pick up another mystery thriller, and that's why it took me so long to get to this. I actually picked this up in like the last week of the month, and so I was really cutting it close with getting to it, but man, I am so glad that I did. This book, it's so good. And I ended up reading it on my Kindle. It's A History of Wild Places by Shea, Ernshaw. I loved this. I cannot say enough amazing things about it. It is just, it had me on the edge of my seat. I just had to keep reading. I wanted to know what was going on, and I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I'm so glad that I read it. I can't say more because I don't want to give anything away, but it was fantastic and I cannot recommend it enough. I didn't think anything was going to be higher than like Practice Makes Perfect with regards to this month's reads. Like I thought that was going to be my favorite book of May. I had to pick this as my favorite book of May. It was just so, so good. The next book that I read was a new release. This came out, I think, earlier in the month, and I was hoping to get to it this month, but planning on reading it towards the end of the month, and that's Meet Me at the Lake by Carley Fortune. I have been seeing people reading this online here on YouTube and on Instagram, and I've been kind of seeing a lot of like middle of the road thoughts on it. And so I was going into this not necessarily expecting like a blow me out of the water romance. I enjoyed Every Summer After when I read it last year, but for me, it was just so similar to Love in Other Words that I was really hoping this was going to feel like a more original story. And it did feel like a more original story. I actually did really enjoy the characters. It has a then and now timeline, which I really like, and I really liked in this book. I do think that there was a little bit of some issues with the development of the male lead that made his actions towards the end of the story frustrating in a way and less sympathetic. But I did like this more than I thought I was going to. So I would give it a 3.5. I don't think it quite meets 4 out of 5 criteria for me. Like probably 3.75 is the best score for it, but you know, for ease purposes, I would give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I ended up reading in the month was another book of poetry. I just felt very compelled to pick up a book of poetry for some reason. And so I ended up reading Healing for No One But Me by Jennae, Cecelia. I just love this cover. Like I thought it was so pretty. I enjoyed this. Similarly to the other book of poetry I read this month, All Along You Were Blooming, I thought it was a little bit monotonous. I think that this could have been edited down to be made about a quarter or a third shorter. But I did appreciate and enjoy some of the material in here. There's definitely several of these poems that I have like dog-eared in my book that I want to be able to go back to. So I'd probably give it a 3 out of 5. Enjoyed it, but didn't love it. And that's going to be it for the books that I read in May 2023. I don't even know how many that was, maybe 10 or 12 books that I read this month. So again, definitely less that I've read in the last couple of months, but that's okay. Like, it's not a numbers game with regards to reading. It's all about your enjoyment. And while there was definitely a few books on my reading list this month that I didn't love or that were kind of like middle of the road reads for me, I enjoyed Practice Makes Perfect and A History of Wild Places so much that like I feel like I had a great reading month. And I'm very excited for June. If you have any books that you want to recommend to me, or if you've read any of the books that I read this month and want to chat with them, please put a spoiler-free comment down below. I love talking with people about books. And as always, everyone, please be safe. Bye-bye.